If you didn't have a chance to check out Caleb's column on Phillip Fulmer, you need to do so. You need to give it a read. And that will lead us to today's tough question. Today's tough question is brought to you by Andy Mason, realestate.com.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
Don't make a mistake that's going to cost you thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. Go to andymasonrealestate.com. He's your realtor, over 40 years of experience in his office in the Knoxville area. Best prices, best service. Today's tough question. As Tennessee football's emotional connection to Phillip Fulmer held it back. You state the case. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you talking about specifically the emotional attachment when he was still coach, the emotional attachment by not distancing themselves from him in the NCAA investigation? You tell me what you mean by the emotional connection and if it's held Tennessee back. Your thoughts, Caleb Calhoun.
I'm saying the emotional connection since his administrative career has begun. I think that let me say the main reason this is an issue, and then I'm going to go back and just kind of talk about the missteps they made with their emotional connection to Phillip Fulmer. The big misstep to me right now, and the reason I think Tennessee has a really hard case to make that there was no lack of institutional control during the Pruitt scandal, is because they let Phillip Fulmer retire with the severance package. They should have treated Phillip Fulmer exactly how they treated Jeremy Pruitt. I don't care what he did as a head coach. This was what he did as an athletic director. And they should not have said, because he's a Hall of Fame head coach, we're going to let him walk away with the retirement package, whatever. You know, the Cincinnati Reds in the 1980s in baseball didn't sit there and say, because Pete Rose is the all-time hits leader, we're going to let him keep playing even though he's betting on the sport. They were like, no, we have to ban him from the sport because he won't stop betting as a manager. What Fulmer did as an athletic director, we all agree. Dave, real quick, if Jeremy Pruitt is dirty, and he was, Phil Fulmer was dirty, right? Phil Fulmer's hands are as dirty as Pruitt's, right?
I don't know but I see where you're going.
Yeah. He is the lack of institutional control. If you're going to sit there and say, don't fault us for lack of institutional control because we got rid of everybody, but at the same time you say, but we gave one of the primary players in this incident a severance package and let him retire because of what he meant to the university in the past, you're not real serious about this lack of institutional control. Now, let's go back and look at how Fulmer got to this point. Remember, John Curry named him special advisor to the athletic director, literally made up a position for Phillip Fulmer after John Curry got the job over Fulmer. Now, I criticized John Curry getting the job over Fulmer. Not that I thought Fulmer should have gotten the job, but you knew that was a Haslam hire. They wanted a puppet, and Curry was that was Jimmy Haslam becoming AD of Tennessee. John Curry getting hired, and
the young one, not Big Jim.
Right, the young one. And John Curry then named Fulmer special advisor to try to bring everybody together. Anybody who knows Fulmer's history knows Fulmer will scheme for a job he wants the minute he's in a position to be able to do that. And and so he schemed for the AD job, right? He pounced right when the Schiano disaster happened. Fine, you do what you do for your career. I'm not knocking it. Phillip Fulmer, you've talked about this, was disastrously unqualified for this position. Had no administrative background whatsoever. More importantly, not only did he have no background, his background actually suggested he would be bad at this job. When ETSU revived their football program in 2014, they asked Phillip Fulmer to be an advisor to them. Phillip Fulmer was instrumental in them hiring Carl Torbush as head coach. For those who don't know, Carl Torbush coached at North Carolina after Mac Brown left the first time in the 90s. His best year, no coincidence, was 1998 when he went 7-5. This was a hire from the 1980s and 1990s way of thinking to revive a football program in East Tennessee. Torbush was 11-22 in 3 years. Tennessee looked past all of that to name him athletic director because they needed an emotional reason to bring him back and thought it would unify the fan base. And then they stuck with him and let him walk away of his own accord after all the Jeremy Pruitt stuff blew up. Make no mistake, Fulmer's record as an athletic director is miserable at this point. And you can honor what he did as a head coach and say you never should have hired him as AD. and you never should have let him walk. You never should have let him retire to save face. Never should have let him do that.
But the question I have for you, is that more Phillip Fulmer's fault or is that more the administration's fault? Because if somebody calls me and says, I want you to, let's say Powell High School, where I went to high school there in North Knoxville, they say, we want you to be a special advisor in hopes of turning the football program around, which it's pretty good now anyway, so they wouldn't need me. But it would be hard for me to turn that down. And not that I would be qualified either, much like Fulmer. But is that Fulmer's fault for taking that job?
No.
As an advisor, I don't know that it was his fault. Now, if you want to take it the next step, and I had a very well-known player call me on a Monday, and he said, I guarantee you Phillip Fulmer is angling for the AD job. Sure enough, Phillip Fulmer had it by Friday. I laughed it off at the time, but it was true. He was angling for the AD job from the get. So if you want to come down on him for that, I understand, Caleb. But as far as the advisor role, I can't blame him for taking that position. And I will say this in somewhat of a defense of Phillip Fulmer. I believe firmly that he cares and loves the University of Tennessee, and he wants what's best for the University of Tennessee. But I think he likes Phillip Fulmer just a little bit better, just a little bit more. Would you disagree with that?
Oh my gosh, no, I fully agree with you. And man, people came at me on Twitter about 4 years ago when I said the same thing. And, heard a lot of people say, oh no, he loves the university more than himself. And like, no, he doesn't. But I'm not faulting him. No, I'm not faulting him at all. I'm faulting the university because the university has to make the tough decisions. The same way, by the way, I don't fault Fulmer for the whole Fulmer Majors thing in 1992. What do you do if you're Phillip Fulmer? You coach as an interim head coach, you win 3 games, and then Majors comes back, the team splits, they lose 3, and then Doug Dickey, the athletic director, comes to you and was like, I want you to take the job full time. Is Fulmer supposed to say no? I don't blame him for that. I don't blame any coaches for that. I don't blame Derek Dooley for accepting the Tennessee job. I blame Tennessee for hiring him. And so I think that
why did you dislike the John Curry hire so much? At the time, I thought that was a good hire. It blew up, obviously, but at the time, I thought it was a good hire.
I disliked it because it was very clear that there were a lot of leaked reports over people who were interviewing that the Haslams specifically wanted John Curry. And when I knew that the Haslams wanted John Curry, I knew at that moment they wanted a puppet. They wanted somebody that they could control. And I think, look, the Schiano hire, that was a Haslam attempted hire. That wasn't a Curry hire. That was a Haslam hire. Jimmy Haslam, we all know when he was with the Browns, was the only NFL owner who still loved Greg Schiano after he got fired by Tampa Bay years before.
It was also a Peyton Manning-driven hire, for those that don't know.
Well, yes, but it was a Peyton Manning-driven hire at the behest of the Haslams because
Agreed.
Peyton Manning, wanted a – sounds like Peyton Manning was promised a potential ownership job in the NFL somewhere that he hasn't gotten. So, I knew Curry was a Haslam hire. I also knew Curry had a little bit of arrogance. I mean, look, when he was, I don't know how much I blame that, but when he was at Kansas State, I mean, the guy did run off Frank Martin. And then, like, the same year Tennessee hired John Curry, Frank Martin took South Carolina to the Final Four.
Yep.
And there were some ties, with John. Then there was the whole, and look, John Curry was instrumental in Tennessee hiring Lane Kiffin with no strings attached and throwing a ton of money at the staff. I mean, that was when John Curry was working with Mike Hamilton. So, hiring Lane Kiffin alone isn't a black mark on the resume. Hiring Lane Kiffin and giving him everything he wanted with no strings attached, that's a black mark on the whole athletic department at the time.
Well, hiring Lane Kiffin with a $700,000 buyout after year 1 was pure stupidity. That he could leave for it may have been $800,000, but it was just, chump change for that level of football. To say that a guy can be disgraced in the NFL and you hire him and he doesn't have, after the first year, like a $5 million buyout, something stupid that he can't leave, then that's Mike Hamilton's fault at the end of the day.